Hello.
It started with a simple text from my old friend Tyler. Hey, any chance you're free this weekend? My aunt needs help in her yard. She's got some overgrown stuff she can't handle alone. I had just wrapped up finals and was back in town with absolutely nothing to do. So I figured, why not? Some sunshine, physical labor, maybe a free lunch. I didn't expect it to turn into anything memorable. Tyler's Aunt Karen lived on the edge of town, tucked away in a two-story craftsman-style house with weathered paint and ivy curling around the porch railing. The place had character, quiet, lived in, a little overgrown but in a charming way. It had been at least 5 years since I'd last seen her, probably back in high school when I stopped by with Tyler to pick something up. Back then, she was just his aunt. Tall, neat, polite but distant, always with her hair tied back and a cup of tea in her hand. Now, as I pulled up the driveway, she was standing by the porch steps with a wide-brimmed straw hat in one hand and garden gloves in the other. She looked different, still elegant but softer somehow. Her hair was loose, shoulders relaxed, her smile warm without being overdone. "Tyler said you might come," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Thank you for helping. This place has gotten a little away from me." "No problem at all," I said, stepping out of the car. "I'm happy to help. It's a nice place you've got here." She chuckled. "It was nicer before the blackberry bushes tried to take over." We got to work almost immediately. The backyard had a slightly wild feel. Flower beds tangled with weeds, a trellis that had half collapsed under the weight of ivy, and a shed that hadn't seen the inside of a broom in years. I dug up roots and trimmed back brambles while she raked and collected the debris into neat piles. We didn't talk much at first, just exchanged simple instructions and the occasional shared laugh when something surprised us, like the mouse that darted out from beneath a tarp, making her jump with a small yelp. It was hot and the work was real, but I didn't mind. Karen had a calm energy about her, one that made even the sweat and dirt feel kind of peaceful. After a couple of hours, she called for a break. "Lemonade?" she offered. "I've got some in the fridge. Come on, you've earned it." We stepped into the kitchen, which was just as cozy and lived in as the outside of the house. Light poured in through the windows, making the old tile floor glow. She handed me a glass and leaned against the counter, sipping her own. "So," she said, tilting her head, "what's new with you? Last I heard, you were off at college." "Yeah, just finished this semester. It's been a lot. And now you're back here," she said, nodding. "Funny how the quiet finds you again." There was something in the way she said it, not sadness exactly, but a kind of reflective loneliness. I could tell this house had grown too quiet for her. I glanced around, noting the absence of any recent photographs or signs of other people. I remembered vaguely that her husband had left a few years back, but I didn't know much more than that. Tyler never really talked about it. I finished my lemonade and offered to keep going. She smiled. "You're very kind, but honestly, I think that's enough for today. You've already saved me from at least one snake bite and a tetanus shot." We both laughed. She walked me to the door, but just before I stepped outside, she hesitated. "I was going to make something simple for dinner tonight," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's nothing fancy, but if you're not busy, you're welcome to stay." There was no pressure in her voice, just a quiet invitation. I considered it, then nodded. "I'd like that," I said. Dinner was simple. Pasta with roasted vegetables, some garlic bread, a bottle of red wine she opened with a nostalgic shrug, left over from when I thought I'd be entertaining more. We ate on the back porch as the sun dipped behind the treetops. The sky glowed orange and pink, cicadas sang lazily, and the air cooled just enough to make everything feel soft. Our conversation drifted from safe topics, school, family, books, to more thoughtful ones. She told me how hard it had been, learning how to be alone again, how she'd spent months doing everything right, hoping it would fix things, only to realize sometimes there's no fixing people who don't want to be fixed. I didn't know what to say to that, but I listened. At some point, she reached over and touched my hand. Not in a suggestive way, just a soft gesture of thanks. But it lingered a second longer than expected. I looked at her and she looked back, and something shifted. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but undeniably. As I helped her carry the dishes back inside, the space between us felt charged in a way it hadn't earlier. She smiled, said thank you again, and walked me to the door. I stepped out onto the porch, the night air thick and still. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. "Sure," I said. "I'd like that." She watched me for a moment longer than necessary, then turned and disappeared inside. And I stood there, wondering why my heart was beating a little faster than it should have. The next day, I arrived just after noon. The heat was already building, but Karen was out back, waiting with 2 glasses of iced tea and a sun hat that she offered me with a grin. "I figured you wouldn't bring your own," she teased. "I'm more of a baseball cap kind of guy," I replied, taking it anyway. We picked up where we left off, trimming the hedges along the back fence and pulling out the last of the weeds near the garden beds. It was hard work, but the air between us felt lighter today. Familiar. She was more talkative, asking about my college life, what I planned to do after graduation, if I ever thought about leaving town for good. And then, just as I was tugging a stubborn root from the ground, she said it. "I used to think I'd leave this town, too. When I first got married, we talked about moving to Colorado or Oregon, somewhere with mountains, somewhere fresh. But he liked routine too much, and I guess eventually so did I." She didn't say his name. I didn't ask, but something in her voice was heavy with memory. We kept working until the sun forced us into the shade. Karen brought out sandwiches and we sat on the stone steps leading down into the yard. She slipped off her gloves, then her shoes, stretching her toes into the cool grass. I watched her from the corner of my eye. How relaxed she looked, how different from the rigid, polite woman I remembered years ago. "You ever regret it?" I asked, unsure where the courage to do so came from. She looked at me, her expression unreadable at first. "Not leaving? Or staying with someone who made me feel small?" I said nothing. I didn't need to. Karen leaned back on her palms and stared up at the sky. "I think I regret not remembering who I was. Before him. Before I became someone's wife, someone's cook, someone's ghost." That line stuck with me. Someone's ghost. Later, while she cleaned up in the kitchen, I gathered the garden tools and returned them to the shed. When I came back inside, she was upstairs. I could hear water running, shower, probably. I stood awkwardly in the hallway, unsure whether to stay or leave. I walked into the living room and sat on the couch, flipping through a magazine from the coffee table. The house smelled like lavender and soap. When she came back down, she wasn't expecting me to still be there. Her hair was damp, curling slightly at the ends, and she was wearing a pale robe that tied loosely around her waist. She froze in the doorway when she saw me, and for a second, I thought she'd be upset. But then she smiled. "I didn't realize you were still here. I wasn't sure if you needed help with anything else," I said. My voice cracked slightly. She didn't say anything right away, just walked to the cabinet, pulled down 2 wine glasses, and opened the same bottle from the night before. "Help me carry these to the sunroom?" she asked. The sunroom was more like a quiet corner of the house wrapped in windows, filled with potted plants and an old chaise lounge. I hadn't been in there yesterday. We sat across from each other, sipping wine and watching the trees sway outside. The air was heavy with late afternoon stillness. Felt suspended in time. "I don't get many visitors," she said, "especially not ones who listen." I looked at her. Maybe they don't know what they're missing. That made her laugh. A soft, unguarded laugh. She leaned her head back and looked at me with a new kind of attention. "I used to think you were just one of Tyler's quiet friends," she said. "Always polite, always disappearing into the background. But you're not quiet now." I swallowed. "People change." She nodded. "Yes, they do." The pause that followed was thick with something we both felt but didn't say. And then I stood up, intending to leave, to end the day on a respectful note. But as I turned toward the hallway, she spoke again. "There's a box of old photo albums in the basement," she said. "I meant to sort them, but they're heavy. Would you mind helping me bring them up?" It sounded simple enough, but something in her tone made me stop. I nodded. "Sure. Show me." We walked through the kitchen and down the narrow basement stairs, the light growing dimmer with each step. It smelled faintly of dust and cedar. She pointed to a stack of boxes near a shelf, but neither of us moved to lift anything. Instead, she walked slowly around the space, trailing her fingers along the edge of a wooden table. I stayed where I was, unsure if I should follow or wait. "I used to paint down here," she said suddenly, "before everything became about someone else." I stepped closer. "Why did you stop?" She turned toward me, and for the first time I saw it clearly, the way she was looking at me. Not as her nephew's friend, not as some passing visitor, but as a man, someone who saw her. "I think I forgot how," she said. The silence wrapped around us again, thick and electric. She took a step closer, and my breath caught in my chest. But instead of closing the space completely, she brushed past me and picked up one of the boxes. "Let's take this one up. The rest can wait." And just like that, the moment passed. But not the feeling. That lingered. Long after I left, I could still feel the weight of her gaze. And the way she said, "People change." The next time I came by, it rained. A slow, steady drizzle that turned the garden soil to mud and the air to mist. I offered to reschedule, but Karen just smiled and said, "The plants needed it. Come in. I'll make us something warm." She had the fireplace going in the living room. The soft glow of the flames flickered across the hardwood floor, casting gold onto the walls. The whole house smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke. It didn't feel like visiting someone's aunt anymore. It felt like stepping into a quiet world that only the two of us inhabited. She handed me a steaming mug of tea, and we sat on opposite ends of the couch at first. But conversation pulled us closer. She asked about my parents, my plans after graduation, if I had someone waiting for me back on campus. I said no. She didn't ask why. Eventually, we ran out of things to say, but not out of things to feel. The silence between us was comfortable now. Thick, yes, but not awkward. More like expectant. Then she stood. "I actually do need your help in the basement this time," she said with a small smile. "I wasn't just being poetic about those albums." She led me down the same wooden stairs, her hand grazing the banister. It was dim again, the single bulb casting a warm halo over the boxes. She knelt near one of them and opened the lid, revealing a mess of photos, loose and unorganized. "These are all from my 20s, she said, pulling one out. "Back when I thought I had everything figured out." I stepped closer. The photo was of her at some beach, wind in her hair, a drink in one hand, smile carefree and real. Not the version of her I knew now. Not the version the world had aged and quieted. "You looked happy," I said. "I was." She glanced up at me, but not for long. She reached into the box again and pulled out another photo. This one, her with her ex-husband. Her smile was still there, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I stayed because I thought that's what you do. You work harder. You forgive. You shrink a little." She looked up again. Her eyes were wet but steady. "Do you ever wonder what your life would be if you hadn't followed the path someone else made for you?" I didn't answer. I was too focused on the way she said it. Like it wasn't just a question about her past, but a warning or maybe even an invitation. She set the photo down, stood slowly, and turned to me. "I'm sorry," she said. "I shouldn't be talking to you like this. You're young. You have your own life." "I'm not that young," I replied before I could think better of it. She blinked, surprised by the firmness in my voice. "I don't see you the way you think I do," I added. Her eyes searched mine. "And how do you think I see you?" "As Tyler's friend, as a helper, as someone who's just passing through." She stepped closer. "And how do you want me to see you?" I didn't answer, not with words. There was something in that pause, one heartbeat, then two, that cracked the wall between us. And even though I didn't move, and neither did she, it felt like we'd already crossed the line. Karen looked down as if grounding herself, then walked to the far side of the room. Her voice was quieter now. "I'm not asking you for anything," she said. "I know how this could look. I know how it sounds. But for the first time in years I feel seen. Not judged. Not dismissed. Just seen." I swallowed hard. "That's not nothing." She turned her head slightly, as if she'd heard something in my tone. "I never meant for you to be the one," she said. "But here you are." Then she faced me, her expression unreadable, but not cold. We didn't touch. We didn't kiss. Not yet. But in that basement, surrounded by fading photographs and unopened boxes, something undeniably intimate passed between us. A truth neither of us could unsay. When we finally went back upstairs, she didn't offer me more tea or wine. Instead, she walked to the front door, opened it gently, and stood beside it. The message was clear. The moment had ended. But just as I stepped outside, she said softly behind me, "Tomorrow's supposed to be sunny." I turned my head. "Yeah." She nodded once. "The garden could use some attention." I nodded too, holding her gaze. "So could the rest of this place," I said. She smiled, but it was the way she closed the door. Not quickly, not with finality, but slowly, like something unfinished, that told me we'd both be back. The sun was already warming the dew when I pulled into the driveway the next morning. Karen was on the porch, sipping from a white mug. No makeup, no earrings, just a simple green shirt and jeans, her hair down and slightly tousled by the breeze. She didn't wave, didn't call out, just watched me with quiet eyes as I stepped out of the car. I didn't say, "Good morning." She didn't say, "Come in." But we both moved like we knew the rhythm already. We didn't go to the garden right away. Instead, she opened the back door and led me into the kitchen, where the smell of coffee lingered and a plate of toast sat untouched. She poured me a mug, added a splash of cream without asking, and slid it across the counter. "You remembered," I said. "I noticed," she replied. We drank in silence, and it wasn't awkward. Felt like the beginning of something fragile, like we were both afraid words would ruin it. Eventually, we walked into the yard and resumed our work. Not that there was much left. Most of the beds had been cleared, the ivy was tamed, the lawn freshly trimmed. Still, we found tasks. She trimmed the rose bushes while I swept the walkway. Every now and then our eyes met. There was no flirtation in it, just gravity. When I accidentally pricked my finger on a thorn, she was beside me in an instant. "Let me see," she said, taking my hand before I could protest. Her fingers wrapped gently around mine, inspecting the drop of blood. "It's nothing," I murmured. She didn't let go. "Still, you've done too much to get scratched like this." I looked at her, really looked, and realized how close we were standing. And she realized it too. Neither of us moved. The space between our bodies held tension like a drawn bowstring. I began, but she didn't let me finish. Her hand tightened slightly around mine, and then her other hand reached up to brush my cheek. "I haven't touched anyone in so long," she whispered, voice trembling. Could have stepped back. I should have. But instead I leaned in, just a little, just enough to let the moment decide. And the moment chose. Her lips found mine softly at first, hesitantly, as if asking permission. When I didn't pull away, she deepened it, and suddenly I wasn't thinking at all. My hands cupped her waist. Her arms wrapped around my neck, and the quiet garden dissolved into something electric. When we pulled apart, we didn't speak. She stepped back first, her face flushed, eyes wide with something between fear and disbelief. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "That was—" "Don't," I said. "Please don't apologize." Her breath caught. "This isn't just curiosity for me," I added. "I meant what I said. I don't see you the way others do." Karen looked down, and for a second, I thought I'd lost her. But then she took my hand again, this time with purpose. "Come inside," she said. Her voice wasn't seductive. It wasn't commanding. It was hopeful. We walked through the back door together, not speaking, and she led me up the stairs. The hallway was dim, quiet, filled with the ticking of a distant clock. She opened the door to her bedroom and paused at the threshold. "You don't have to," she said. "I know," I replied, and I followed her in. The room was sunlit and simple. Cream-colored curtains swayed gently, casting soft shadows on the walls. The bed was neatly made, the kind with too many pillows, and a book sat face down on the nightstand. She turned to me and reached for the buttons of her shirt, but I caught her hands. "Let me," I said gently. She nodded. We undressed slowly, not in lust, but in trust. There was no rush, just touch, warmth, and quiet sighs. It was delicate, intentional, like two people trying to remember what intimacy was supposed to feel like. Afterward, we lay side by side, her head on my chest, fingers tracing circles on my skin. "I don't know what this means," she whispered. "Me neither," I said honestly. "But I don't want it to end here." She lifted her head to look at me. "You'll leave eventually. Go back to school. Move on. Maybe. But I'm here now." She looked at me for a long time. "That's the most anyone's given me in years," she said. We stayed in bed most of the afternoon, talking, laughing, dozing. At one point, rain started again, soft and steady against the windows. She told me stories she hadn't told anyone. About her dreams of opening a gallery one day, how she used to paint before life got too loud. I asked if she'd start again. She smiled. Maybe, if I have someone who'll remind me who I used to be. I kissed her forehead. I think you already remember. She fell asleep in my arms, and I stared at the ceiling, wondering how something that felt so unexpected could also feel so right. That night, I didn't go home, and I didn't want to. The morning after felt quieter, not in an awkward way, but in that deep, peaceful stillness that comes after something real. I woke up before Karen. The soft light from the window outlined her profile as she slept beside me, one arm resting over my chest like it had always belonged there. I didn't move for a long time. I watched the way her eyelashes trembled slightly, how the corners of her mouth relaxed. She looked younger like this, unburdened. Eventually, she stirred and opened her eyes, blinking slowly as if returning from somewhere far away. Her gaze landed on me, and she smiled, tired, warm, vulnerable. "Still here?" she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "Still here." She tucked herself closer, and we didn't speak for several minutes. Words would have only cluttered it. After a while, we got up. She pulled on an oversized sweater and moved to the kitchen to make coffee. I followed, shirtless, still a little dazed by the dreamlike quality of it all. She moved around the kitchen like she was rediscovering her space. Stronger now, brighter. Over coffee, she asked about my day like nothing had changed. But everything had. "I don't want to hide," she said after a long pause. "But I'm not ready to explain either." "You don't have to," I told her. "Not now." She nodded. "But people talk. Tyler, he might wonder." That was the truth hanging over us. My friend, her nephew, the entire reason I even knew her. "I won't lie to him," I said gently. "But I'll protect you. Whatever this becomes, I'll protect it." She looked away for a moment, as if weighing something she hadn't dared consider until now. "I don't want this to be just a story you tell one day. You know? That summer when I messed around with someone older and broken." I stood, walked over to her, and took her hands in mine. "It won't be," I said. "I don't want to forget this. I don't want to forget you." She didn't cry, but her eyes shimmered. After breakfast, I stayed to help clean up the tools we'd left out during the rain. The garden was soaked, but somehow more alive than ever. Petals heavy with water, soil rich and dark. A metaphor, maybe, for everything that had bloomed between us. We didn't talk much as we worked, but it was the kind of silence that says everything. Later, we went back inside and sat in the sunroom, wrapped in a shared blanket, her head resting on my shoulder. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a clean, golden sky. "I'm scared," she said suddenly. I squeezed her hand. "Me too. But I'm also happy." "So am I." We stayed like that for a long time, the day stretching quietly around us. We didn't make promises. We didn't talk about the future in concrete terms. But in those hours, we let ourselves exist as we were. Two people who had found something unexpected and beautiful in the middle of ordinary life. Before I left that evening, I stood at the door and looked back at her. She didn't ask if I'd be back. I didn't need to say it, but I did anyway. "See you tomorrow?" Karen smiled and said, "I'll be here." As I walked out into the warm dusk, I realized something. It didn't really matter how we'd met, or the age between us, or what people might think. What mattered was how she made me feel. Seen, trusted, needed. alive. And maybe that was the most unexpected part of all. Not that she let me in, but that I never wanted to leave.
Bye bye.